the session on manufacturing and access to vaccines, medicines, and health technologies in Africa, the Team Europe initiative. This is one of the sessions that I know that many people have been looking forward to, and we, I think, all recognize the importance of this issue. COVID-19 has highlighted the vulnerabilities of global supply chain. Africa, I think, as we all know, currently imports 99% of vaccines and over 90% of medicines. In April this year, the African Union launched the Partnership for African Union Manufacturing, vaccine manufacturing, with the clear objective of moving from dependency to health sovereignty. In response, in May, President von der Leyen of the European Commission announced the Team Europe initiative on local manufacturing at the Global Health Summit. As we look forward to this session, I think one of the issues we face is looking at the whole complexity of this issue, what's called the 360-degree solution, bringing together the different actors, looking at the supply side, the demand side, how the enabling environment is put together. So some of the issues we're going to try and touch on in the session this morning is the need for multi-actor partnership, how we bring the public and private sectors, international and multilateral organizations together with civil society, the private sector, etc. Secondly, looking at the short-term response, but also longer-term sustainable responses. We see, again, a partnership that is needed between the African Union and the European Union to build that local production in Africa and diversify global value chain. Also, some of the issues we'd like to touch on is about access to quality, safe, affordable health products for all, looking beyond just the question of the current COVID-19 response. Now, this morning we have an illustrious panel. I have to say we're delighted to have some extremely prominent speakers, those that are leading the debate on this issue. I begin somebody I'm personally privileged to be able to work with, the Commissioner for International Partnerships, Jutta Urpilainen, who is a global advocate for equitable access to vaccines. And one of her priorities is to put people and human development at the center of EU external action, tradition of supporting access to medicines and vaccines. We also, this morning, Ms. Sumwama Swaminathan, 350 published works, and is a driving force for making new health technologies available globally. Finally, this morning, Ms. Fatih Enzi Hassan, who is the serving African Union Development Agency, who serves in the African Union Development Agency as the head of human capital and institutional development, supporting 55 African Union member states in ensuring every single person in the continent can thrive. So that's our panel for this morning. We're going to have a first round of questions to each of our panelists, and then we'll perhaps take a second question and then open it up to the audience. So I'm going to begin with Commissioner Upalainen. Welcome. Good morning. I'd like to ask you first what role that the European Commission can play to ensure equitable access to global common goods such as medicines and vaccines. Commissioner.
Thank you, Mark. Good morning, everybody, especially good morning, Minister Leyen. I'm very delighted to participate in the Paris Peace Forum. And as the theme of this year's Paris Peace Forum suggests, one of the greatest challenges of the pandemic is the gaps it has exposed. And of course, COVID-19 has touched us all, but, not equally. However, when it comes to infectious disease, no one is safe until we all are safe. And when it comes to equality, we cannot be equal until we have equal access to health services and also the health products. And this implies solidarity and partnership. I shall look a little bit backwards. When COVID-19 struck Europe, the magnitude of the crisis mandated a new approach to fight back together with our member states. We pooled our resources and also our expertise in a collective approach called Team Europe. We not only responded to the crisis in Europe, but also worked closely together with WHO, Gavi, and partners worldwide to reach all corners of the world and share vaccines. And actually today, Team Europe remains one of the largest donors to COVAX, with a collective donation of approximately 3 billion euros. Unfortunately, access to COVID-19 vaccines is still very much unequal, and we are accelerating our vaccine donations towards our partner countries. But to fight the current pandemic and also prevent future ones and really achieve equality, we need to collectively scale up manufacturing capacities while promoting regional integration and access for all. Mark, you already explained in your introduction that Africa imports 99% of the vaccines it uses and over 90% of its medicines. So, of course, we share the ambition of the African Union to diversify pharmaceutical value chains. And this is why we have launched a Team Europe initiative of at least 1 billion euros to help ramp up production capacity in Africa and, even more importantly, equitable access to essential enabling environment. On the supply side, we are working to advance industrial development and transfer technology. And on the demand side, we are helping to shape markets, facilitate trade, and guarantee buyers for locally produced vaccines. Finally, we are also working to create the right ecosystem or enabling environment to ensure equitable access to health products and technologies. And this involves improving pharmaceutical and health systems, developing a skilled workforce, and strengthening the regulatory frameworks. We have already mobilized bilateral support packages for Senegal, Rwanda, and South Africa, and of course, there are more to come. We are also preparing regional actions together with the African Union. For example, we will support the African Medicines Agency, building on the experience of the European Medicines Agency. COVID-19 vaccines are, of course, the priority right now, but in the long term, we will need additional health products. If successful, they could play a vital role in preventing also epidemics. So our vision is that similar breakthroughs will one day be the result of local research, local innovation, and manufacturing. And that's why our collaboration with the WHO in the context of the new mRNA technology and beyond is so fundamental. So in the short, Team Europe is fully committed to helping our African partners meet their goal of producing 60% of vaccines for Africa in Africa by 2040. And I would really like to thank my fellow panelists who are working with us on this critical initiative. But I would also like to invite more partners to join us, because when it comes to combating diseases, geographic borders are meaningless. That's something we have really seen. So we need far more than Team Europe or Team Africa. We need Team World.
Thank you, Commissioner. A number of key words there: solidarity, partnership, looking at that whole approach, but also Team World. I think that fits very nicely into, if I could move to Minister Redon. France is very much a driving force within Team Europe, plays a crucial role. My question to you really is, why does Team Europe collectively support local manufacturing? Perhaps give a sense of the politics behind this, the political importance for you of this. Monsieur le Ministre.
Thank you very much indeed. Hello, Jutta, and greetings to the panelists here this morning. We all know that immunity to the COVID-19 virus will have to be global, or if it's to happen at all, because we live in a world where there is movement of people and the emergence of new variants can at any time call into question the efficacy of our vaccines and the care protocols. We know that countries that have the most vulnerable health systems are those which also have the lowest vaccination rates. In the African continent, in some regions, only 3% of the population have received a first dose. So for all these reasons, France is completely aligned with what has been said by Jutta about Team Europe. We want to really fight in very pragmatic terms to ensure that the COVID-19 vaccine can be a common public good. We said this last year at the Paris Peace Forum, and we're reiterating it again this year with the same conviction, in the name of the principle of solidarity that reflects our well-understood mutual interests, but also the values of justice and humanism that are at the heart of the European project. And this is the whole point of the Act A initiative that we launched as of spring 2020 to promote equitable access to safe, effective, affordable and high-quality health products. This is the whole point of the COVAX facility. And thanks to COVAX, the most fragile countries in Africa have already received donations of 124 million doses. And the effort has to continue. This is what we called multilateralism that is evidence-based. And France is proud to have been part of this initiative and have called upon rich countries to share their doses with the most fragile countries. This was a statement made by the President of the Republic, Macron, last year at the Paris Peace Forum. We've already given 67 million doses, and other deliveries will be occurring over the coming weeks and months. So vaccine solidarity is imperative, and this is based on the wish to have an effective campaign, but also a humanist imperative. And this is the whole point of the efforts to encourage the development of autonomous pharmaceutical production capacities in the South, particularly in Africa. This is vital if we are to achieve the objective of universal health coverage, and also to be prepared for the possibility of another crisis on the same scale. In a world where some powers are instrumentalizing international cooperation to force the most vulnerable countries into a kind of dependency, it is also a matter of sovereignty, which is, of course, essential for our partners. Today, it has already been said, Africa imports 99% of its vaccines and more than 90% of the medicine that it uses. This has got to change. The African continent must acquire sustainable, autonomous local production capacities. The Team Europe on health and products and vaccine, 20 million euros in financing within the frame of Act A, and also to be followed by other European countries. There's going to be a first technology transfer hub on the African continent. This has been launched by the WHO, the Medicines Patent Pool in South Africa, with the support of Unitaid. The Pasteur Institute in Dakar has launched a partnership with the European Commission, Germany and Belgium to set up a regional hub to increase vaccine production capacities in West Africa, not just for COVID, actually, but we need to do more, as Jutta has rightly pointed out. And this is why, in the frame of Act A, once again, France is supporting the setting up of production hubs. It's providing 50 million euros for this. And this is why we support technology transfer initiatives and also initiatives to train a highly skilled staff. I'm thinking in particular of the action of the Medicines Patent Pool to facilitate voluntary licenses with the pharmaceutical industry. In this respect, we very much welcome the license that was granted for a promising antiviral treatment, molnupiravir, which is developed by Merck. This is an example that must be an inspiration for the whole pharmaceutical industry. And this is also why we want to encourage what the Commissioner pointed out, regional level harmonization of the regulatory framework for health products in Africa. We support the partnership between the European Medicines Agency and the African Medicines Agency. This is essential, and I must say that this subject will be one of the key priorities of the French presidency of the European Union the first half of 2022, and also a key subject at the summit between the European Union and the African Union that we will be organizing during our presidency. Thank you.
Thank you, Minister. Again, some essential points here. Looking ahead, obviously, to the French presidency, that crucial African Union EU summit in coming up at the start of next year. But also, I think you've very clearly pointed out the wider picture, the importance of the sharing of doses, but also what you described as the evidence-based multilateralism. And I think that a number of crucial points. I'd like to move on quickly. We don't have a lot of time this morning. To Dr. Swaminathan, to really look at a different angle, which is the critical factors that will actually incentivize the development of, in particular, research capacity in Africa, and how that can be used to transform to impactful programs. So, Dr. Swaminathan, if you could give us your thoughts on that particular aspect. Thank you.
Thank you so much. It's indeed an honor to be on this panel with Commissioner Jutta and Minister Le Drian. And in fact, President von der Leyen and President Macron have been two of the greatest supporters of the ACT Accelerator, of COVAX, and of the local manufacturing work stream that we initiated several months ago. I think both Commissioner Jutta and Minister Le Drian laid out exactly the reason why we need to start thinking about building national and regional health security. It's the inequities that populations living not just on the African continent, but also in other parts of the world, which do not have the capacity to manufacture locally, whether it's gloves or PPE or oxygen or diagnostics, drugs and vaccines. The countries that have manufacturing our access have done much better than those who have not. And we can see the inequities really growing every day. Today, something like 2.5 million vaccine doses are being given as booster doses in about 80 countries, while only 1.5 million doses are going to all of the countries with less than 10% coverage on a daily basis. So this is why we thought about launching a vaccine manufacturing working group and task force under the ambit of the ACT Accelerator to really focus attention on what needs to be done. And as you rightly said, it's not a simple solution that can be solved overnight. And I think the African Union's goals of meeting 60% of their vaccine needs by 2040 is really a very realistic and pragmatic one, and will, with partners like the European Commission, France, and many other countries that are now interested in supporting, I think we can make very good progress. So let me tell you what the WHO did very briefly. The first thing we did was that in April of 2021, we put out a call for people who have mRNA technologies, developers, manufacturers, companies, biotechs, to come forward and offer to set up a technology transfer hub. So we need the technology, we need a country to propose, and we went through a rigorous process of selection. There was a lot of interest in this, and the first hub was selected to be placed in South Africa as a consortium of a biotech company, Afrigen, the manufacturing company, BioVac, the Department of Science and Innovation of South Africa, the Medicines Patent Pool, the Africa CDC, along with the funders group that's very much strongly driven by Team Europe, coming together to set up the first mRNA technology transfer hub. And just yesterday, we've put out a call now for all of those manufacturers in low and middle income settings that would like to receive the mRNA technology, because we think we can start transferring technology in the early part of 2022. And two countries in the Latin American region, Brazil and Argentina, have already been selected through a regional. So I want to highlight here that there are three key elements to making this successful. The first and probably the most critical one is the workforce. And in surveys that have been done, it's very clear that there are going to be a lot of gaps in the workforce. You need people who are trained in the chemistry, in the upstream R&D, especially mRNA technology is a very new one. So you need people who know how to make the lipid nanoparticles, who have experience in that. Then, of course, in the actual manufacturing itself, the operators who run the machines. Then you need people who are trained in quality control and assessment, in safety protocols. You need the clinical researchers who can run the clinical trials, biostatisticians, data scientists. And of course, you need a strong regulatory system. There are only two regulators, national regulators on the African continent who have achieved maturity level 3. The WHO has a maturity rating system, and that too, they are not for vaccines. So we're working with particularly South Africa, Senegal, Rwanda in the first instance to strengthen their national regulatory systems to be able to, when the products are developed, to be able to authorize them, license them, etc. You also need the regulators to keep an oversight on how the clinical trials are being done. So this is already in process, and I think we really welcome the creation of the African Medicines Agency and the partnership with the European Medicines Agency. We should be able to make good progress. The second element is really to think about, and I think Commissioner Yuta touched on this, is to think about a sustainability of these manufacturers. In the beginning, generally, manufacturers, when they start producing a new product, the cost of goods is higher, especially if they're a smaller setup. And therefore, these vaccines or other products they produce may actually be more expensive than those that are already available in the market. And therefore, there has to be a lot of thought given and a lot of planning done on financing these products, because without being able to absorb and procure these products that they produce, and without the commitment to perhaps paying a little bit more for a certain number of years to get the same product, just to support these new manufacturing sites, this will run into difficulties. And we've seen this before with our previous experience of influenza vaccine hubs that were set up about 10 or 15 years ago, many of them could not sustain themselves. So that's very critical to do the market shaping, to work with agencies like UNICEF, the PAHO Revolving Fund, Gavi, to make sure that procurement, that on the demand side, that there is a demand and that it will be financed. And the third critical element is the political will, the leadership, and the willingness to support and going, beyond terms of governments. This has to be a long-term support. Once a country commits to it, it has to last, even beyond a particular political dispensation. So these are the three very critical elements that really need to be taken into account. And maybe just to finish, I would say that we have done a very detailed exercise looking at the different elements that are going to be needed from the selection of technology. Within mRNA, you have a lot of choice. And so there are second generation mRNA technologies that maybe can be even stored at regular refrigerated temperature, and they don't require cold chain. So we need to look at those upcoming technologies very carefully because there may be benefits. The second is around the IP, and this is why we have the medicines patent pool, who takes care of the managing the IP and transferring technology. You have the training of the workforce. We are putting out a call very soon for biomanufacturing training hubs. And we think that we will need many hubs around the world to train the workforce for the coming years. And then we have groups looking at governance of these hubs, at sustainability and financing. Thank you.
Well, thank you to you. I think you've very nicely set out the three key issues in reverse order: political will, sustainability, but also the workforce, and also focused very clearly on the issue of technology transfer. I'd like to now move to Mrs. Fatih Enzi Hassan to really take that to a different angle, if I can, which is more the question of regulatory frameworks. And I'd like to, if you could very briefly set out, because I would like to still leave some time for questions from the audience. What is the importance of the African Medicine Agency and the role played by Order NEPAD in strengthening those regulatory frameworks in the context of developing the African industry?
Bonjour et merci Marc.
Morning. And thank you very much to give us the floor to talk to us about the African perspective of things. For me, it's a great honor to participate on this panel with Minister Le Drian and with Mrs. Opi Leyen and Mrs. Swaminathan. Your question is something which is very vital to all of us. We have a mandate that heads of state and government have given us, and that is that our agency would not only reinforce capacity and work on capacity building to work on these issues, but also will be an interface and a technical partner with our African countries. This is particularly the case for regulatory affairs. Here we work in two areas. First of all, we have since 2009, when we actually started the African regulatory body for medicines, we have grouped together all the different medical and medicines agencies. It's called IMNRH. And in fact, this groups 85% of African countries, sub-Saharan African countries, where the regulatory positions have greatly improved. IMRH is the predecessor of the African Medicines Agency, and in fact, it brings together work methods, but also different tools and instruments. The second aspect of our role is to give technical assistance to African countries. And this is since since the setting up of the treaty on AMA, and also up to the actual operationalization of the setting up of ACTA, including the recruitment of teams. The African Medicines Agency is crucial from a African point of view, because for African countries, the AMA is a tool in which it can regulate nationally, continentally, the production and the manufacturing of medicines, so that they can actually harmonize the way in which vaccinations and medicines are manufactured and distributed. There are different roles that the AMA plays, but I just like to concentrate on two. First of all, it is to guarantee sovereignty for regulations, and this in itself is an extremely important step because it has an effect on supply and demand, and the way in which local populations can actually accept these medicines. Secondly, it's the setting up of an African cross-border market. And here, once again, for these medicines, so that we can actually develop an African pharmaceutical sector or industry. And we are very enthusiastic on the Team Europe initiative for the Partnership for Vaccine Manufacturing in Africa. We think that this initiative will actually reinforce the question of sovereignty. And here, once again, this is the thinking behind the discussions that the African Union and the European Union are having right now. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for that African perspective. I'm very conscious we have 10 minutes left. I would like to just try to bring this together. I think we see the political will. I think we see the importance. Many of you have highlighted the ambitious goal to produce locally 60%. I guess my question, the obvious question that I think many would ask is, we see the political will. The question is, can you all work collectively together? Are we going to see global collaboration or global and overlaps? We also have a couple of questions that have come in. How do you ensure that there is popular support for these projects, both in Europe and in Africa? A question from Munir Marani. As part of Team Europe, the initiative, are there any programs or any support to the private sector? This angle that I think a number of you have touched on, the question of how do you bring the private sector into the Team Europe approach, and taking this forward, as I said, in terms of global collaboration. Will you collaborate or will you compete? So if I could, I'm going to go in reverse order, if I may. We only have a few minutes, so I'd ask you to be very short, perhaps a minute each, if you can. Starting first with Mrs. Enzi Hassan.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Mark. As you had said in your introduction, the president of the Commission of the African Union would step up to 60% of production in Africa by the next 5 or 6 years. Now, obviously, given the fact that COVID occurred, the pandemic occurred, that has distracted us somewhat, but our approach is to be more long-lasting and more holistic. And we would like to be able to use these means not only against the pandemics, but against other pathologies that affect Africa in a huge manner, such as malaria and also HIV. As long as all the different partners agree on a plan of action, we will be able to move fairly fast. The question of sovereignty is key, and this obviously has an effect on manufacturing and production. And secondly, also the importance to create African markets for vaccines and for medicines, and this should be done for the Africans by Africans. Thank you.
Thank you so much, and thank you for being brief. Dr. Swaminathan, if you could address those questions in light of the remarks you've also just heard. Thank you.
Thank you. These are very important issues and very critical to the success. And one of the reasons we set up this manufacturing task force that's coordinated by WHO, but with a number of partners, is exactly to avoid a fragmentation, duplication of efforts, with different countries partnering with in different ways, and setting up these plans for plants without really thinking through all of the elements, that we touched upon earlier. And so WHO has, I think, a coordinating role here to make sure, and working with partners, obviously, like the Africa Union, they're absolutely critical and have done a lot of the groundwork, and we follow their lead, in the countries that they decide. So I think taking a regional perspective is very important as well, regional health security, because particularly for a continent with a number of small countries, every country cannot and should not be thinking about setting up, mRNA production. So the first is global coordination and regional coordination, taking a regional health security approach. And I think the private sector is very important. You need the private sector. They have to be, having the demand side worked out in advance will give confidence to the private sector that they can invest in these new capacities. And I think starting with COVID, there's a huge, really, possibilities and options for them to work on diseases like TB and malaria and many other diseases that afflict people on the African continent. And finally, I would say that there needs to be some agreement, particularly for pandemics, on how R&D that's funded by governments, using public funds, using taxpayer funds, the returns should be treated as public goods, as global public goods, and should be made available to people that need them, regardless of where they live. And that's something that will probably be discussed as part of the pandemic treaty negotiations. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I'm actually going to turn now to the Commissioner, because I'm going to end with the forthcoming French presidency. So, Commissioner, if you could reply to those couple of questions. Thank you.
Thanks, Mark. I think that the pandemic has really taught us that if we race against each other, we will collectively lose. So this is the case with health, but also with climate and other global challenges and issues. So we can no longer afford to luxury of fragmentation and duplication. So these old unilateral approaches are not sustainable, and we will not generate the impact we need to overcome new common challenges. Lead the transition forward and towards fair, greener, and more sustainable and equal societies. And as I explained, and also Minister Le Drian explained, Europe is definitely playing its part. We have chosen multilateralism to respond to the pandemic by setting the ACT Accelerator and COVAX, for example, and of course by announcing this Team Europe initiative. With our member states, and we are demonstrating it today with Minister Le Drian, we are joining forces by combining resources, assistance modalities, expertise, and tools. By working all towards specific joint objectives and contributing a shared team, Europe has become more than some of its parts and is able to be a trusted partner of the African Union. But in order to make equitable access to vaccines and medicines a reality, we will also need to coordinate the work within the global framework and the initiatives launched by the WHO and other partners. For example, with the US, we have launched a joint manufacturing and supply chain task force, and I have ensured that our respective work with our African partners is also coordinated as part of it in order to maximize the impact. And I finalize with the role of the private sector. I was in Rwanda 2 weeks ago, and I was very delighted to notice that Rwanda, but also Senegal, actually signed the MO with BioNTech company. So the role of the private sector is crucial, and we are also working very closely with the private companies and the private sector relating to this new Team Europe initiative. So this is a joint effort we need to take.
Thank you, Commissioner. I'm not sure, we have I think maybe some technical issues. I'm not sure if the Monsieur Le Drian is still connected. I don't think so. I think we no longer have him, unfortunately, with us. But that, I think, simply leaves me to conclude. I think we all have seen today the strength of commitment from so many different actors behind this Team Europe initiative, but also I think a recognition that there are so many different angles here, whether that be the supply, the demand, the enabling environment, the political will, technology transfer, etc. So this is still very much the start of a process in a way. A lot has been done over the last year, but as we move into 2022, turning those commitments into a clear manufacturing capacity in Africa and elsewhere is the challenge we all face. Thank you so much to all the panelists for the superb interventions, and we look forward to taking the work as we move into 2022. Thank you so much.
Thank you.